Hey guys, it's Chris Carrabba from Dashboard Confessional and Further Seems Forever and Twin Forks, and you're listening to the Voice and Verse podcast.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 13 of the Voice and Verse podcast. I'm your host, Evan Lucy, taking you through the stories behind your favorite songs. This week, I am incredibly thrilled to welcome to the program Mr. Chris Carrabba. For the past 15 years, Chris has been one of the preeminent forces in the emo genre, thanks to his work with the bands Further Seems Forever, Dashboard Confessional, and Twin Forks. He's enjoyed 3 gold albums, all with Dashboard, and even released the single to the Spider-Man 2 movie, a song called Vindicated, which launched him into arenas and made the band a household name. In 2012, Carrabba reunited with his Further Seems Forever bandmates to record Penny Black, the band's first new album with Carrabba on vocals in 11 years. These days, he's enjoying his time in Twin Forks, an Americana folk band he started with friends. The group released their self-titled debut album earlier this year and have been on the road ever since with groups like Augustana and Philip Phillips. I caught up with Chris backstage at the 930 Club in Washington, D.C. to talk about how his earliest influences actually color the music he makes now, being a victim of your own success, and how he was strong-armed into playing the first ever Dashboard Confessional show. This week's show runs a little longer than usual because Chris and I had such a great chat the first time that we didn't get a chance to cover everything we wanted to, so the first half of this episode touches on his early days, Further Seems Forever, and the beginnings of Dashboard, while the second half, which was recorded over Skype, touches on mid to late period Dashboard Confessional as well as the music he makes in Twin Forks. So, I hope you enjoy this very, very long, but very informative and very fun conversation with Chris Carrabba.
Follow the signs, right back to you, back to you, back to you. Right back to you, back to you.
But I like to kind of start out with a general question to get everybody kind of thinking, but do you remember the very first song that you ever wrote?
I do, Evan. I remember the first song I wrote. I wrote it with my my stepbrother Bill, and it was a country song, and it was terrible, but it was really funny. We really wrote it to make to make some girls laugh at a party, and but I do think we got structure. We figured out structure pretty early on, even though it was just a goof, you know.
Yeah. So country is kind of what you're doing now, little folky thing.
Yeah.
Did you grow up on that kind of stuff?
I did. It was this great big amalgam of influence in our household between my mom, who liked everything from Fleetwood Mac, which was like her favorite band, to like metal stuff like Guns N' Roses, but also like really loved like outlaw country, Steve Earle, Willie Nelson, you know, the whole shebang. My stepbrother, who was super into metal and country, and which I find to be pretty common these days still, you know. And then my stepdad, who was like just straight up country, like that's all he listened to, you know. So and I'd say my mom listened to also like a lot of that folk stuff, and so we had you can hear like my own song in the background with my band checking it. It's kind of funny.
Who's singing?
That's Jonathan. He's got a great voice. It's about 7 feet tall, so I can just only imagine how he's bending over to hit my mic. And in any event, that's what I remember. And I remember the laughter, you know, just like the joy of writing the song. Mm-hmm. And it ended up being, we still laugh about it. We still play it on the porch now, you know. And this is a long time ago. Billy and I wrote this song, you know. We never wrote a song together again.
What was it called?
It was called I think it was called Bubba.
Bubba. Okay.
Bubba.
When did you get
a dude named Bubba?
Oh, that you knew?
No.
No.
He's
Totally.
the guy we dreamed existed. Seemed like the best dude.
When did you get into to like punk and hardcore?
Around the same time, because I was into I would say like, so, you know, I grew up on this like heavy duty, mostly what I gravitated towards in that earlier era was the Paul Simons and the Townes Van Zandt stuff, and I didn't know why I liked it so much. I would come to realize later that it was probably the storytelling and the power of the Travis picking and there's a lot going on there that I didn't understand what it was drawing me in, but then I began skateboarding a lot, and I would buy these skate videos, and that's when I really found punk rock. The first one being I even watched surf videos without surfing. There's not a lot of surfing in Hartford, Connecticut, and but I would watch the videos for the music, and so I would say like Operation Ivy was like, I just lost my mind. I remember hearing Operation Ivy on maybe an H Street video, if anybody remembers that skate team. And there was a surf video that had Jane's Addiction.
Okay.
It just blew my mind. These were genreless to me. I didn't understand what punk rock was, and I certainly didn't understand what Jane's Addiction was. I still don't know what genre they're in. They defy a genre. There's only Jane's Addiction in that genre.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, people lump in like Jesus and Mary Chain and things like that, but I don't hear anybody else.
And that's the ultimate compliment you can pay a band, is that they are the only
There's
only band that sounds like them.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's only one Pavement.
Yeah.
There's only one Jane's, you know, and then Operation Ivy, you know, led me down the rabbit hole. I got the Lookout catalog, and I got Green Day and Screeching Weasel and all these, you know.
Yeah.
And then that led to like, and I found the hardcore scene as my brother Bill started getting into this stuff with me, and also his taste was more metal than mine, or more heavy than mine. So when we started ordering these records, we were finding these hardcore records, heavier records, and you know, they really are sophisticated. You know, it's all like, you think about some of these, even like the Youth Crew punk rock stuff, you know, like Minor Threat and Youth of Today and Gorilla Biscuits, you know. And you think there's lack of complexity because it's all youthful energy.
Right.
But these are guys that intrinsically understand the power of song structure and lyricism, and maybe what they're saying is very simple. Maybe it's not. I don't think it was, but it's very plainly spoken, I guess. And that was really relatable to me. I really could understand it. You know, I loved prose. I loved poetry. I loved Paul Simon. I loved listening to Bob Dylan, even though it was years before I would understand what the hell he was talking about or actually saying. But these guys, you know, they spoke so plainly and clearly, and without any pompous verbiage, which I would come to use a lot of pompous verbiage. I don't know how that happened, but in any event, I don't know that I used pompous verbiage, but I used the way my family talks is the way my songs ended up, was reflected in my, you know,
Sure.
My mom's was an English teacher, so you know, that kind of stuff just sort of like,
It's kind of woven into your fabric then.
It's a bit of, I didn't know some of these words or phrases were unusual. Started to jump all over the place, but yeah, that's how I got into punk rock. Is skateboarding was so tied into skate. They're still inexorably linked. You know, sorry, there's the 50 Cent word right there. And it made the video more powerful, it made the music more powerful, it made the skating more powerful. Everything was just, and we'd go crazy trying to find these records that I like, tapes, like dubbed tapes. They just sounded off. I couldn't hear anything, you know. I remember talking to Tim Armstrong the first time I met him, and I was just like, when I finally got a real version of your of that Operation Ivy record, I couldn't believe there was actually guitars, because it was all the high end was gone, right? You know, in the tapes I'd had, you know, it's just great.
Well, nowadays it's you get really terrible sounding MP3s, I guess, and then maybe you stream it on Spotify or something. Right. And wow, I hear new things that I haven't heard before.
Or maybe, you know, you're only on these iPod headphones or iPhone headphones, and you know, and then you have the eureka moment when you put on, somebody's got real headphones, you put them on, you're like, there's a whole other song in here.
It's like, do people just start mixing on earbuds?
Some do, man. You know what? I'll tell you what I do sometimes. I don't mix on them, but I certainly give a listen to them. Thank you, Jack. I certainly will reference that, because I am aware that that's how people listen to music.
Right.
And it's the same reason, like, you might have taken, as you were mixing, taken your disc into your car, because that's where people listened. You know, that's the way people hear music, you know. I want it to sound good there too.
Yeah, or on YouTube, wherever people get it these days.
Yeah, I don't know how to. I'm going to upload my half-finished songs to YouTube to see how they sound.
No, I mean, people consume YouTube music like crazy. That's how Rise Records, man. They make so much money. They put their whole catalog up for free on YouTube with ads, and they just rake in the money on ads. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So you joined Further after that. You moved to Florida.
So I grew up like kind of analogous to an army brat. You know, my mother had this strange position where she would, first she worked as like an English teacher for foreign medical schools. So we bounced around, and I lived in Mexico for a while for one. And then in the process, she was getting her master's degree. And so her career became taking insolvent nonprofit organizations and turning them around so that they were profitable. But then, of course, once that's done, there's no place for her.
Right.
That's her profession. So she goes on to the next place. So do we. And, you know, I guess it set me up for this kind of life, you know,
exactly.
The transient lifestyle. She said something real wise once, you know. I remember, like, it wasn't terribly hard, because it wasn't totally abnormal to grow up that way. We were aware a bit that it was strange compared to other people's lives. But I remember, like, there were a time or two where I'd really become connected to where I was, and I really didn't want to go, and we'd be heading to some place, and I'd say, you know, like when I remember it being very small and saying, like, you know, when we get there, will that be home? Be in a car, you know.
Yeah.
Like, we're home now. But that one stuck with me that one sticks with me now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it does enable me to do this in a way.
Yeah. It's a very wise thing, and as a kid, you might not understand that, but as you grow older, you learn to.
At the time, it just made me feel like that warm thing a mom can make you feel. Now, as an adult, I realized, wow, man, that was wise. That was powerfully wise.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
But it led you to lots of good things in Florida.
Oh, well, so then I ended up in Florida, and this was great, too, because there's a few things that happened as we moved down to Florida. I didn't want to go. I was very, very happy where we'd moved back for a couple of years to Connecticut, where most of my family's from.
I was born in Connecticut.
Where?
In Norwalk.
Okay, so we're not too far. I was in Hartford. And The LNG's in Norwalk, right? Is that where the LNG is? No, that's in New London.
I only lived there for like 4 years.
Oh, okay. So
I
you didn't go to a lot of shows?
I don't know.
I didn't want to leave. I'd kind of found my thing. I'd just gotten a guitar. I'd gotten really good at skateboarding and gotten sponsored by like a store, which seemed like the pinnacle.
Oh, wow.
It was I don't know. So then I moved down to Florida, and two great things happened. So she had been hired to turn this place around. It was a home for both abused children, children being mostly middle school to high school kids, teens, I should say, and the children of, maybe people that were either in halfway houses getting into prison or drug addicts. And so now where we lived in Hartford was not, it's not, at one point it was like the murder capital of the, there was a lot of crime. There's but we didn't really feel unsafe or anything like that. I felt wary going into this situation. I just didn't know what to expect, I'd seen blood in, blood out and shit like that. I didn't know what to expect, So I got in there and there were just these like normal, absolutely normal kids with really terrible circumstances that they were lucky enough to be in a place where they were going to be delivered from that, right? So it was this great experience too, and like people would, say, where do you live? And I'd say the name. I won't say it now, but I'd say the name of it, and they'd look at you funny, and it was eye-opening, It was like, and we didn't have to live there, and we didn't live there the whole time. But that was part of my mom's plan. We were going to like live in this place.
Was that in Boca?
That was in Boca. Okay. And so you don't think of Boca as this place
right.
for... It's kind of known as like a rich retirement place. Mm-hmm. But what I'm describing to you is the absolute opposite of this. And so we didn't live there too long. I guess it was maybe junior and senior year of high school, right? Yeah. So then around that time, I was in this band called the Vacant Andes, mm-hmm. which was... I kind of came in as a replacement, but one good thing that came of that was that I met Dan Bonebrake, who would be, for a while, the bass player of Dashboard. Also, he's my best friend. And then also I was in a band called The Agency with Mike Marsh, who would become the drummer of mm-hmm. Dashboard. But after the Andes would play a lot of these shows with this band called Strong Arm, and I was just obsessed with them. And it was weird because they were a Christian band. They were like a ministry band. Like they really had a message, And that part of it didn't connect with me so strongly. But I barely noticed it because the music was so powerful. It didn't rub me the wrong way. Mm-hmm. I was open to listening to what they had to say, but I just I grew up Catholic, and like the born again Christian thing is very different than Catholicism. I think Catholicism is like a tradition,
right?
And I think born again Christianity is some kind of euphoria or something, right? And but needless to say, they were just this powerhouse of a band. You're talking about a 5-piece. 4 guys of the 5-piece were like over 6'4". They were just like, they used to build themselves as half a ton of hardcore.
Nice.
And I just loved playing with them. And they were getting a little burned out on hardcore. They were getting a little burned out on the limitations they felt from hardcore. They wanted to try to make music like Weezer and the Foo Fighters.
Okay.
And they wanted me to sing. But they could absolutely not write songs in straight time. They just won't do it. They just can't do it.
Right.
So the closest they got was what would become Further Seems Forever, which is a complicated math rock band.
There are still songs on that record to this day that I've listened to hundreds of times that I still get tripped up on. It's
try
crazy.
To sing them, try to know where to come in, But that was our attempt to be right down the middle.
Yeah.
So I fell in with these guys, great friends, still my greatest friends. Very lucky, very, very lucky to play with guys that you talk to these guys and they'll tell you they know nothing about music. and then they'll write a song. And I happen to know a lot about music because I study it more than they do. I would not say I'm as good as they are. I understand what they're doing more than they understand what they're doing. And what they're doing is out of control. And sometimes I trip them up. Like sometimes I'll try to explain to Josh or Steve, like, what's happening here with the time signature or the key change or the borrowed chords or whatever. And they just look at me like,
it's just a
waiting for
feeling, you know. Sometimes people
they write completely by feel, but how they're when I write by feel, it's like Jawbreaker.
Mm.
When they write by feel, it's like science. It's made of math. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like a robot. It's basically made of math.
Were you good at math?
I was not great at math, no, but I was good at music.
There you go.
But I have a learning disability that I was joking about this the other day, like how high I scored on the English part of the SATs, and I think I got like a 10 on the math. Because I had this. I was saying that, you know, I was in like all the these honors classes, and I don't know how I angled my way into these, and then I was in math. The name of my brother was in trig, and my other brother was in calculus, and I was in math. So
just simple math.
And now since discovering my learning disability, I've kind of like gone on my own self study, and you know, I'm not going to learn trig, but I can balance the books, you know. But the further guys, their approach to songwriting is really piecemeal and out of the ordinary. So if I can pick one to describe, there's a song called The Bradley, which I entitled, and I'll get to that in a second as to why I titled it that. So they write parts. They might have a part this week, and they might have another part the next week, and it's not intended for the same song, right? Keys could be different, time signatures could be different, but as you said, there's a commonality of feel. And so one specialty that one thing I brought to the band was being able to identify why this song from this week would work with that song from 3 weeks ago. And they called me the boa constructor. Everybody has a nickname in the band, so the fact that I could like maybe piece together the songs, and that's one of my favorite songs that we ever made. It's really powerful, and it's unlikely that it worked because of how strange the writings of it was. Probably took 2 or 3 months to write that song. Wow. We stopped to write other songs to completion in the middle, but and the title The Bradley came because I'd read about this tank that the government used as a basically money laundering thing for padding the higher ups' wallets. It was a prototype tank, and if they needed a new pool or something like that, they would write it off as some new armor for this tank, and then they would put it on the prototype, but write the budget for the production of this thing that would never go into production because the thing was like it probably couldn't even roll, right? And so it was just all these pieces tacked on, and so we called it the Bradley.
It makes sense. That's cool. So the Moon Is Down came out in 2001, but you had already released a Dashboard record before that.
I did.
What was the impetus for doing Dashboard? Was it just you needed to break from the math rock, or you wanted to?
Yes, it was. But also it was that, you know, sometimes things just kind of happen. I started it because I wanted to break from the math rock. But Evan, I didn't have any idea that it was going to be anything anyone would hear, and I certainly was absolutely focused on Further. That was I lived and died for that band, and for those guys. And we were meant to go into the studio to demo something, and they canceled. And I remember I called up James Wisner. He was our producer for a long time. He's just masterful masterful producer and terrific guy, and frankly, a really good teacher, in addition to helping me understand song structure and all this stuff. He really taught me a lot about recording, and I can produce records now, and I credit him with my ability to do that, with my being able to do that. But I called him up. Guys are bailing, if you're still free, I've got a handful of songs. Now, let me go back a little further. All those songs that I had, I presented to further, with the idea that we could weird them up. They were better at weirding things down. And they had this weird kind of confidence in what I was doing that I didn't, in respect to Dashboard. They really liked it. They really thought it was its own. They championed it. I couldn't have done it without those guys saying, like, this is, particularly Chad and Josh. They would just, play them the songs or give them the little cassette or whatever, and they really loved it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want them for further, but they really loved it. And I'll circle back around, but even to the degree that. Well, let me say. So I go in and I record this album, just because it's me and an acoustic guitar. I think we did it in a night, maybe 2 nights or something, and it was fun. Me and James got to hang out. That was kind of the idea.
Let's hang out and make a record.
Yeah, let's hang out, just noodle, make some music. It's just me and this guitar. Maybe I can learn a little bit about recording with nobody else around.
Mm.
And but the songs had something, and so when I showed them to my friend Amy Fidler, who is I don't know where I'd be without this girl. She owned a label in South Florida, and she kind of held the scene together a lot. She was a promoter. She wrote zines. She put out records for Newfound Glory, for Dashboard,
Mm-hmm.
for I want to say Poison the Well, but I'm not certain about that. Just about everybody. She did a comp, like a Florida comp with Hot Water Music on it, and Less Than Jake, and all these. She just was this firebrand, and she's younger than us by a couple of years, so that always impressed me too. Like to have this massive follow through. But she was always going to be that way, So she heard it, and she heard the demos, and she was like, "This is a record." And I was talking about going in with James to do the thing, but I don't have a guitar. Like, the guitar I had was a total dog. She's like, "I'll tell you what, I will buy you a guitar, and if you let me put the record out." So she bought me a guitar for $150, and then she put out the record.
Yeah. Which
might be the best deal anybody ever made for a record, right?
Yeah.
And which isn't to say she didn't compensate me correctly later. She's absolutely above board, honest. But still, like, if it was just that, it would have been like the like Bleach, where you hear like they signed Nirvana for $500,
right?
Made
Exactly.
that record for $500. It's it's a gold or platinum record, or whatever. Not quite that.
Pretty good return on investment.
Yeah. And Chad and Josh convinced me when we were at okay, so the record was out just because there was a record, and there was Amy, and we were still waiting to record something.
Okay.
And then in the interim, we started to not get along. It had really nothing to do with anybody's desire to do further as a band. It really had to do with their lack of desire to tour, and my realization that the only
way to do it is the tour.
I mean, we're not getting on the radio, kids. This is it. We gotta hit the road. But they've been doing it in Strong Arm since they were like 14.
Wow.
So they were just like spent. And I can understand that looking back, but at the time, and they weren't getting along because they were burned out. And these guys are, as I said, that many years in, and at some point, I guess maybe it's difficult to talk it out. And I'm just the new guy not understanding, like, well, guys, this is pretty simple. You just kind of go on tour, And so the long and the short of it is that we went out. We did tour, and then Josh decided, he was the main writer, but he wasn't going to tour. That was the first. I guess that was the first piece of the puzzle that fell out, and started, with a fill in. It didn't quite feel like further to me. People start, and he was also the guy that could temper everybody. It's hard to be on the road. Everybody knows that, and you need a guy.
So without him, it kind of falls
Things
apart.
Things got a little tense, I don't know how good I was at understanding. These guys had a lifetime at that point compared to me of being together. And I didn't understand the dynamic as a new guy. So I could see, like, man, you guys talk to each other pretty harshly, And I would be a little baffled by it, And I try to, in my own way, to kind of correct that or end up getting sucked into it too. But when we did go out, we played these shows and we just felt like $1 million, and things kind of happened, like it wasn't that lineup for as long as I would have liked it to be, but it, and certainly got more popular after the fact. But we did feel something special happening, and it was just about at the tipping point when it all fell to pieces.
Okay.
And but before it did, we played a festival, and the guys walked over to some tent where like acoustic bands played and said, "No, our singer's going to do a set here." They set it all up, and then they came to me, "You're going to do this set." I was like, "Oh, hell no, I'm not doing this set. Are you crazy? I don't do that. I'm going to play in front of people like that." And that was it. That was the first, they made it happen. They made me do it, and I don't know.
Sometimes you got to get pushed into the pool.
I had records with me because we had an EP, and I had the Dashboard record, and I still was like sharing, we had to pay the gas somehow, and I had a product to sell, so I was like, well, let's just take this, and they were cool with it, and I think I sold like 600 records. I had like all these records because Amy was like, you have to take these on this tour to deliver them to the stores. We didn't have distribution, so you will distribute these. But I sold them all at this festival, so it was just incredible, and So where would I have been without the band for so many reasons?
Right.
They taught me about music. They taught me about camaraderie, about how to be a band, how to tour. They made me play my first Dashboard show handily. These are giant men.
Yeah.
I don't say no to these guys.
Yes, yeah, you had no chance to say no.
So, and then we made the Mood Is Down. But at that point, the band had just fallen into like disarray in terms of getting along, which is so strange to think about because only weeks later we're like barbecuing again. But for this brief period, it just seemed like none of us can be friends. We can't be creative together. And there was like, I don't need to go into the incident, but there was an incident between two of the guys, and it really kind of like startled me. And I was just like, I can't be in this band, guys, And
you had one hell of a backup.
Well, I didn't have it turned out to be.
Yeah.
But we did what the truth was. What I had was one 4-week tour that I booked with friends in October, and that was it. That was all I was ever going to do. It was truly a side project.
Mm-hmm.
One record, one tour. That was going to be it. And I went out and I did this tour. This is a tour in October, and I haven't come home since. It was unexpected. And then I recorded the record. It was tense, I recorded the record. There's so much tension when we recorded that record. And we just laugh about it now, like, what? For what, It's like we worked on this all that time, and just because a couple of guys weren't getting along, it's like, can we really not just go out for a drink and like hash this out and then like go back in the studio? But when you're young, man, things just have a heavy weight to them it's foolishness. It's simple foolishness.
I talked to Gabe from Midtown a couple weeks ago for the last episode of this, and he kind of echoed the same thing. Like, when you're in it, it just seems like it's the end of the world. And they got back together and they did 2 shows at Skate and Surf this past weekend, and they had a blast. It sounded really good. I was not able to go, but
that's who I was out with that October, by the way.
Oh, okay.
was out with them in Newfound Glory. And anyway, so Further led to Dashboard, and Dashboard led back to Further in the long run, and we're all connected, you know.
Screaming Infidelities was the song.
Turned out to be the song.
What do you remember about that one?
Well, I remember I had this, we talked a little bit about the music I'm doing now with Twin Forks, I think, before we started doing this or maybe we were talking about music I listened to when I was young, you know. And so one of the things that I was afraid of was that I wasn't good enough to do justice within the parameters of that kind of songwriting, that folk style of songwriting, or that outlaw country kind of songwriting. And, you know, there's the GCD cowboy chords, you know. It's like every time I wrote in that, it just felt obvious and really poor man's version of, I wasn't doing anybody any service with that. So I just started messing with the tunings and, you know, until they just, something in the overtone kind of spoke to me. And I was still in this weird 3-4-6-8 feel from Further. And, now, granted, the chords, I probably, if I reduce them down to normal tuning, they probably are just G, C, and D. They are, let me rephrase that, they are G, C, and D. The changes are a little weird, but they have something special because of that open tuning. And, you know, it's like one guy, but it sounds like a little bit more than that, you know, with the guitar. And that song just kind of, it wasn't the first song that I wrote for Dashboard. The first one was Sharp Hint of New Tears, I think. But it was the first one where I was like, well, hold on a minute. This is good. I've got to show this to Further. They're going to want this. And they didn't want it.
Wow.
But
I can't imagine that one as a Further song.
Well, they couldn't either. That's why it didn't become one. But I just thought it was the bones of a good song. That's all I thought it was. You know, like it had a little bit of an odd feel. It had the time signature's not your average time signature. The groove is weird. Everything about it is irregular. But I wrote it in. Oftentimes I really write linearly. Some people write a chorus and then they write the song around it. I just kind of write a story, and sometimes that means there's no chorus until the very end when the whole thing just falls into place finally. And I think that's one. I think that's one of those songs. If I had put that Your Hair Is Everywhere bit in the middle and at the end, it might have been a big hit for a minute.
But it wouldn't have the power.
Who would have cared,
yeah.
Right? You know, in the long run. So I'm glad I trusted my gut on that one and just wrote from my. So I remember, you know, picking up the guitar, and it had I don't know, it had something. And I was just literally, you know, like, I only lived 2 blocks from the girl that broken my heart, and I was a drunken mess a lot of the time, and I was kind of looking for a way to not be that anymore. And that was the beginning of me, like, sobering up. And I'd spent a lot of time drinking a little too much anyway, and I was trying to find my way out of that. And I kind of fell into, like, people believing I was straight edge later and all this stuff, but really what it was like, look, man, I'm just kind of setting myself up for a life pattern here, and I don't want that. I enjoy drinking like anybody else, like any other adult, but I was not drinking like an adult. I was drinking like a buffoon. So that's where there's some of that, you know, coming to grips with that. It's a very simple moment in the song, you know. There's coming to grips with the fact that this girl was manipulative in such a way that she was keeping me around her finger, and it was lyrically, I don't know if it is represented, but in the writing process was a way for me to assert my authority over my own feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And but you know, it did start out with a, you know, sometimes it's just the opening line of a song. You know, I always say like oftentimes if the whole song is in the first line, if you don't have that, you can't be led anywhere as the writer. So I'm missing your bed. I never sleep. It's absolutely true. Like I'd spent years sleeping in this girl's bed soundly, and now I'm sleeping on some, you know, but as it turns out, the guy who would be the bass player later of Dashboard's couch, flea-bitten couch, and suffering from insomnia and worry over further, really, almost more than the girl. Things all get mixed up as a songwriter, you know. So the tale becomes about the girl, but I think the overriding anxiety I was in, that was literally keeping me up at night, I never sleep, was about, why can't I get this further thing
to work?
It's right there. I mean, it's right here. It's everything I've always wanted, and people like it. Surprisingly, because it's odd. And so like I say, you know, you never know which, that line didn't mean what it came to mean.
Right.
The first line did, I'm missing your bed. I never sleep. But the reason I never slept wasn't necessarily that I wasn't in her bed. It really was probably because I was obsessed with why I can't get these guys to get along. Mm-hmm. So, and then one bit leads to another. There's these strange changes, and the timing's a little weird, and I thought to myself, I didn't even think about this. I think back on this, and I realize when I was writing those songs, there was absolutely zero people that were going to hear these songs. I could say whatever I cared to say. I was going to be the only person that heard them. So I'm writing in a vacuum. I can say what I want. Taking a lot of slings and arrows for this one, right? But the truth is, I wasn't trying to be like bear it all kind of guy. I just didn't think why would anybody have ever heard this, you know? So
you had no expectations for it. You just wanted to go in and record some songs that you had.
That'd be a fun night, you know? And the writing was great. It was like the writing of the Swiss Army Romance was one really good week of creativity, where the cable was out and I had a guitar, you know, that kind of deal. So,
well, not to derail us, but it's 7:23. I don't know if you have stuff that you need to do before the show.
I do.
But if you want to, we can set up a phone chat and finish this.
That'd be great.
Because you talked about, you know, you didn't think anybody was going to hear these songs, but then as you progressed, people did hear them, and people were expecting them.
Do you mind if we talk a little bit more?
Absolutely.
I'm really enjoying this.
I would love it.
I think I'm going to get caught up with not having a show if we continue doing it.
That's fine. You know, the last time we talked a lot about kind of the beginnings of Dashboard, but I think something really cool happened once, you know, Screaming Infidelities got some traction and took off, and then obviously you had a lot of success with Hands Down. How did that kind of beginning of the big success change the way that you wrote songs, or did it at all?
That's a really good question. Not immediately. No, it didn't immediately. If it did, it was temporary. But I would probably say, objectively, if I had the benefit of perspective, I would imagine that there was a moment there that it was changed by the success, and I don't think it was Well, it was an ancillary effect of something that came with success that caused the change in a momentary shift in the songwriting. It really wasn't that I had success. It was that now there was like people up a ladder that expected success now from me. And I can think about making Dusk in Summer and the length of time it took to make that record. It's indicative of something. I don't usually take that kind of time to, not that I rush anything or that I'm ill-prepared, but it was an enormous amount of time. It was like, over the span of 2 years, many, many months in the studio. Well, in many studios. And there was, of course, the record I went in to make, the record I came up with very different things. So I would expect that I thought the record that I went in to make was a good representation of where I was as a songwriter when I'd written. It was the logical progression as a songwriter of where I was coming out of my commission. So I think a lot of that record that I went in to make had similar tonality, tenor to, or timbre, I should say, to what Vindicated was.
Sure.
But they were not Vindicated. They were their own songs, and Vindicated being a hit, and I'll say hit just because I don't know another word. Becoming popular. It wasn't, we never had a true hit on the radio. I think I said this before, earlier in our interview, but it's hard to remember now. It's been a month. It's been like a month. But the success that I saw with where the needle was moved was with Vindicated was that was a piece of the next record I was writing. So, but once that needle was moved, I think they wanted just like 10 or 12 of those, or at least like a few more to follow up with. But I don't make records like that. I make records that are I wouldn't say disjointed, but I would say there's like two of everything on a record. That's kind of like my method to like making an album. Like every song has sort of a cousin, but there's certainly not, 10 of the same kind of songs front to back. That's just my own preference. I like records that are, like I can think of a record by, that first record by The Stereo, which to me is thematically very similar throughout the whole record. Or like the Blue record, the Weezer record, the Blue album. And a handful, I would say at least half the record is from that batch of songs I walked in with. Stolen comes to mind. And then the other half of the record was I felt like maybe people were turning the screw on me a little bit to deliver something that was not my expectation or what I really thought, if they had one, my fans' expectation was. It was something that I would describe as serviceable to radio. And I don't know. I don't have trouble writing like that. And I don't have trouble with that expectation either. Sometimes that comes real easy. I've had success writing for myself and writing for other artists. Songs that become relatively easily serviced to radio and have become successful on radio. But I think that that's never my goal when I sit down with a guitar. So I've been lucky that it happens or has happened to me. Everybody's lucky that it happens to them once in their life, right? I've been lucky that I have had that happen and keep having it happen. Very, 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 very lucky. Whereas like guys like that I really admire that are like maybe not even close to our scene, like Ryan Tedder, who's just a hit machine with quality. They're not hits just because he knows the number system of what emotional strings to pull. They're hits because he just writes excessively fabulous, masterful songs, and he understands the paradigm of how radio works, and that's just genreless to him. I gotta imagine because he's had so many hits on so many different genres. I'm not sure that's what I was hired to do. You know what I mean?
Well,
So,
especially since you really, kind of fell into it. Dashboard, we talked about, it was not this thing that was like really planned out. So that when that gets turned into something where people have expectations for you and they have, they want to set you on this path, it can kind of be really confusing.
it was tough. It was a good problem to have. I guess it was a luxury problem, because it was like, okay, here we really want you to be successful. It's not like there was anybody like, it wasn't egregious behavior on
Sure.
anybody's behalf. It was like, geez, like, hey, we're invested in this, and we want you to be successful for us and for you. I mean, there's honor to that. I'm not, I understand that, So I was willing to swing at the ball again and again. Really wanted to hit it out of the park. I'll be honest with you. I really wanted to. Every time you make a record, you're raising the bar for yourself. You're hoping to, you're hoping to succeed but for my case, it's like I'm looking to succeed in new territory. I think some people are just looking to succeed in any territory,
right.
and that's interesting too, like, there's no meritless way to go about this. I hold songwriters in great admiration. I mean, one of the things we talked about was some of my heroes as songwriters, and we talk about those guys today because they wrote these songs that are that powerful. To have somebody challenge you to meet that expectation that comes with the belief that they think you're going to succeed. For them to even say so. So, because I think that honestly, whatever investment like a record label had made in me at that point, my fan base was large enough that they were going to make it back. But I think that they genuinely saw a bright future for me as a writer, and they knew I was at a crossroads. And so, some people that I admire and that I chose to work with, just kept saying, keep trying. So I did. And in the end, there's a few songs that I think, came that wouldn't have come. Dusk and Summer's the title track, the last one I'd written for the record. But the timeline was just so unusual for me. And is if I look back over if I look back now over the between Further and Dashboard and Twin Forks and all the records I've made, that's the one, in terms of timeline, that's the one and only real oddity. The rest were a little faster, a little slower, but not like radically faster or slower. So the next thing I did was, I had this record and it was received well. I think, I don't know if it was received as well as Vindicated was. Vindicated seemed to be like the watershed moment, and Stolen did better on the radio charts, but didn't do. And is a great song. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's fair to compare one song's success to another's, unless you're bean counter or unless that's your actual job at a record label. But for a songwriter, it's dangerous territory, I think. Each song is its own thing, and it carries its own properties. And I think to become even experts like Paul Simon and I said Ryan Tedder before, like, I gotta imagine they don't get too clinical about dissecting their own songs.
Sure.
Maybe they do with other songs as a case study, I would be surprised if they didn't do that. But with their own songs, I don't think, they just know that they've been moved in the moment. And they certainly practice a lot, and suddenly they've got, their bar is higher and higher and higher. So the first thing I did after that was go in and I made The Shade of Poison Trees,
right,
which was my deal with the producer. There were two producers on Dusk and Summer. It was Daniel Lanois and Don Gilmore. And my deal with Don was, I'll chase this thing for as long as you want me to, as long as as long as you let me, when we're done, write and record the record in 10 days. and sure enough, and actually we released it just like the day it was finished. I think we said a record's coming out next Tuesday or whatever, whatever. It would have been the next Tuesday. So, which at that time I think was not really ever done. Maybe Radiohead did it, or someone. Well, maybe Beck did it. I think maybe Beck had done that. I was inspired by that. I thought like, oh, that's a logical progression. That's a logical end to this methodology of making a record. Just put it out. Like with no fanfare, no radio, no anything. It's quiet. It's a subtle record. It's a nod back to the kind of writing I'd done, and even instrumentally, it's similar to the first two records for Dashboard. But it was only in the methodology of recording was it reactionary, but it was reactionary to Dusk and Summer.
Yeah, well,
in that fact,
it's cool that having gone through that 2-year process, and having so much label involvement, you just go, I'm going to do this thing that kind of reminds me of where I came from, and you were able to do that. It's kind of cool that you had the freedom. I think you probably built up the goodwill at that point with a lot of people.
Well, I think there's sweat equity. The fact that they kept saying, build the wall higher, build the wall higher, build the wall higher, and I had built this big tall wall, and I was like, anybody want a pool? And they were like, go ahead and dig one. So I went for it.
Twin Forks, obviously is a left turn, but you're known for taking left turns. You went from Further to Dashboard, and then you went from Dashboard into The Shade of Poison Trees. So why is Twin Forks, and why is it not another Dashboard record, given that you have the propensity to just kind of change your mind and do what kind of moves you?
It's a good question. And I think stylistically, I guess during the course of from record 1 to record 6 of Dashboard, I think there were a lot of left turns. It wasn't uncommon for me to change the sonic template of what I was doing. It wasn't unusual for me to change the kind of songwriting or the approach to songwriting from album to album. But I think the point of view was similar as a writer from album to album. I also felt like I had in the earlier records this very wide berth that my audience would allow me to change. And so what a Dashboard song was not something that was easy to define for a long time. There was an intangible there that made it hard to define. And then it became more easily definable, more easily defined through comparison to, at that point, maybe there's 60 songs out or something like that. I don't know. I'm just throwing a number against the wall, but between EPs and records and stuff, So I found that there was expectation of what a Dashboard song had to be.
Sure.
And I didn't feel like that's where I was. That's not where I was as a writer at that moment. Now, that isn't to say I wasn't sometimes there, and I'm still not sometimes there. I am, and I've recorded. I won't say a number, but I've recorded songs for the next record that I think are. I'll just say it. I think they're incredible songs. And they feel like what Dashboard songs feel like to me, and I'm very excited about those songs. I don't have as many as I'd like, and I'm not as excited about doing that yet. And I think that that's something I can never allow, like malaise. Excuse me for using like a nickel word there, but I can never allow that to set in any kind of like half caring attitude for Dashboard, because so much about what is definitive about Dashboard is the heart behind it and the purity of intention. Now, granted, that's the case with everybody that writes music and everyone that will ever write music. But I think people can hear it. I'm certainly can. Don't you think so?
I think so, but I also think that I talked to you last month, and then I saw you guys play, and I thought, wow, like this has the same energy, and it has the same kind of ability for people who hadn't heard the songs to just sing along, which I think was kind of one of the hallmarks of Dashboard, especially live. You know, I saw you guys for the first time in 2003 on the tour with MXPX and Brand New, and was just, you know, it was an experience. It wasn't just a show. Like there was a sense of inclusiveness that I think kind of translates to the Twin Forks stuff. It's got kind of that same energy and the same kind of spirit of togetherness, I think, when you bring it in front of a live audience. So it's cool that it translates.
Well, so I'll say that that's maybe a little bit by design. You know, I know what I like from Dashboard, from show. I want to talk about shows here, you know. And so when I was like deciding, well, I guess when I was finding inspiration, you know, that's part. I never know how to make that thing happen. I sure wish I knew how to make that thing happen. Because I can't say that every song I ever write has that effect. Those get weeded out of a live show real quick. Those ones that don't work, you know, because of the fact that I love that give and take, and I do love the excitement of the spontaneity, the fact that why does it work? How can this work? You don't know these songs. How can this work? Well, I don't know either. I happen to be the one that knows the song, but I don't know why it works either. I don't know why this works. But I do know that I like it. And, but I guess I haven't defined what makes it different. And I think that was kind of like I'm talking about what makes it the same. And I think your question ultimately is what makes it different, right? Mm-hmm. So otherwise I could have just called it a Dashboard thing. But I do think that there's a lot of intangible things or hard to define things. I keep saying the same keywords here, but that's just because you've got me thinking about it a lot here, and the connection between record making with Dashboard and now having Twin Forks and how that's different. To me, not everything I do relates back to Dashboard. Everything I do relates back to the songwriters that I grew up listening to.
Sure.
And so for me, it was time to, you know, for others, it may be that, well, like I said, it relates back to the songwriters that influenced me. And I think I traded on later influences in the lineage of my comeuppance as a music fan. I traded on the ones that I found later in my schooling, self-schooling or whatever, self-discovery, you know. First for Dashboard, certainly for Further. You know, like Further, we were obviously listening to Jawbox and Quicksand and stuff. And I think if you hear the melodic structure of early Dashboard stuff, it's pretty obvious that I'm listening to Face to Face, and also Counting Crows. And when you listen to Twin Forks, what I'm think is on display there is me really getting down to the crux of like my earliest and most long-lasting musical influences. I talk about Paul Simon all the time and Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan influenced everybody who ever wrote a word. But lyrically, Paul Simon is a master, and he doesn't get enough credit. He gets a lot, but he doesn't get enough. And Townes Van Zandt, you know, was for both of those same reasons. Willie Nelson, Steve Earle. These were songwriters that I listened to in my real youth, that I never really turned my back on, but I was a little bit like in my heyday of my punkness, was in the heady days of my punk rock attitude, was honestly a little bit embarrassed to like, and I'm ashamed of that now. It would have been more punk to say what you fucking love and you know, take your arrows as they come. I think that's, you know, like now I feel like that this relates more to that, to who I am now, while really being heavily influenced by how I was shaped as a singer and a player and a writer because of melodic structure, and a lyricist because of, frankly, probably because like the records that were around me happen to be very lyrical records. You know, for one thing, my mother was, you know, has a master's in English. So she probably was drawn to these lyrical guys like Townes Van Zandt and Paul Simon, because they scratched that itch for her, you know. She's a creative person. She's an intellectual, and English is her the study of English was what she was, you know, delving deeply into at that time as a student at that time. So that's what I got exposed to. So I'm trying to, I guess what I've done now with Twin Forks is combined taken those influences that I would say cut me the deepest end for the longest. That also includes, by the way, Fleetwood Mac, which is like a great thing that we get to explore too, having several else that are in the band too. You know, the combination of just different players, people, but genders too makes a huge difference in the tenor and timbre of the music happening. And also the celebratoriness, the joy is really on display. Maybe first and foremost, where I think, like with Dashboard, that was on display, but I think what people expected, what came to be written about more, was the angstiness of it. And
you're the voice that sailed 1,000 live journal entries, I think is what people have called you.
What'd you say? The what?
You're the voice that sailed 1,000 live journal entries, or aim or aim away messages. But it's
a lot of responsibility for one man.
It's so cool that you start out you know, appreciating all those songwriters, and then, you know, you go and you do a math rock band, and then you go do Dashboard, and then that turns into something where you can play Madison Square Garden, and then you eventually come back to it. The full circle mentality of it is what's really cool.
Yeah, it is cool. It is. I say it all the time. You know, like, this is. I've won the lottery, man. You know, like I've gotten to do what I love. I'm tough enough to take criticism, but I'm also, I'm also like tough enough to not mistake appreciation for currency. And so if somebody does think there's merit to what I do, I don't just keep doing that. Now, I don't know where this leads us next. You know, making this Twin Force record was the most illuminating period of my musical life since making. It's hard to find the line, by the way, when I say this, but Swiss Army and the Places, because they were made so close together, like within months of each other. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's one period of time, even though it's two records. One period of my musical life experience. And I mean, I can draw so many parallels between that then and now, between early Dashboard and Twin Forks. But we both had to laugh, you know, to think about the fact that it was, you know, when I'm the guy defining it as, you know, I recognize I'm not the one that's immediately hearing just the angsty stuff. I hear all of it, but I recognize that there was a power, there was an angst in that. There was a power in that angst that was powerful enough that it defined the whole band, like the whole overarching timeline of the band and everything that would happen within it. And then we were, I guess, an emo band. I guess we are an emo band. I've been struggling with that a lot lately. I've kind of like decided recently, like, fuck it, I take ownership of that word. I don't give a shit. I think that there's like bands like that I hold in such high regard that I called that, because I didn't have that held no malice in anybody's tongue, you know, mm-hmm. when it was first said. And, you know, unless it was, you know, like this was just haters hating for the fun of it, you know, like, you know, the gutter punks hate this, ska kids hate that, you know, if it was just like, you know, rival schools, against each other. That's one thing. But it just generally didn't have like an air of like, I cast this off because it's emo, you know? There was good stuff and there was bad stuff within that music scene. But there was great stuff. I could name Mineral as one of the greatest bands to ever exist. I already said Bucks, which at that time was being defined that way. I don't think anybody ever figured out really what to call them. I haven't, except for Amazing, right? When I come back to Dashboard, I don't think I'll fight that anymore. You know, like, yeah, a lot of the fucking songs I write are emotional. He says with emphasis.
I think they're all emotional, but it's just it's a tag that, you know, for better or worse means something. But, you know, now that you've had all these different experiences, I think the future is really kind of open for you. You can do truly whatever you want to, because you have a folk band, you know, you might make another further record down the line. You have Dashboard that's, you know, you've written songs for that. So I think you can.
Well, I guess, you know, what I was going to say, Evan, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I got myself looped. But what I was going to say about like feeling like I won the lottery and knowing that you described an odd, something cyclical here happening, you know, that I got it from like, you know, basement shows to Madison Square Garden. And now I'm playing clubs again because I've started this other band. And I don't want to trade on the successes I've had, and nor am I maybe able to. I don't know whether I'm able to or should be allowed to. I know I shouldn't be allowed to. I'll say that much. But I do say that I don't do passion projects. Like I won't do this band. I don't do side projects. I do things I'm passionate about. I don't do passion projects. None of these things are projects. Like further, when we do a record together, when we came back to do that record again, it was not a side project for me. It wasn't. I invested every bit of myself in that and put Dashboard on hiatus to do that. You know, it's not like something I do on the side. And with Twin Forks, I think there's people that love it, and there's people that, and I get that. And there's people that don't, that think it's not for them, and I get that. But what I find like flabbergasting is like I was at a bar the other night and somebody just came up to me and they'd been staring at me all night, and I was thinking to myself, man, these two they don't like me at all. I don't know whose foot I stepped on coming in here, but they don't like me at all. And then at the end of the night, they came over and asked for a picture. And this is like kind of like a, you know, a hip bar, you know. I certainly wasn't, you know, I wasn't. I had a hat on. I had my long sleeves, so I thought it was just like a person in a bar that was just definitely less cool than everybody else there. Certainly, everybody in the bar looked more like they were in a band than I did, which I admire. I thought they were awesome. I'm sitting there taking notes. Like, wow, that's a get up, you know, shit like that. And they asked me for a picture and said that they'd been listening to Dashboard on the way there, and they sat there kind of stunned that I was actually there, and they felt like they conjured me up by listening to me in the car. And so I said, so was this like the first time you listened in a long time? And they were like, no, we listen all the time. We're fans. We listen all the time. I'm like, oh, well, have you, you know, like, I hope you can come see Forks play. And they say, who's Twin Forks?
Oh man.
But that's the one that gets me like a little like, I don't get, that's the one I don't get. It's like, you know, people are, you know, everybody's invited, but I'm not gonna, that's the one I don't get how to balance, because everyone is invited, but I refuse to stick this band on anybody's throat.
Sure.
But I do hope they discover it. Yeah. So I guess that made me feel a little bit like the job I'm doing, I'm going about it the right way, but I sure wish I could just get the invitation out a little wider. But I'm trying to be patient because I want this to be earned the right way.
Well, if somebody is not conjuring you up through listening to your music, how can they find out about you and Twin Forks and all that you have going on?
Oh, you mean like through the internet?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have no idea.
Go ahead and plug your Twitter or whatever you want to.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're Twin Forks Music everywhere. So we're Twin Forks Music on Instagram and on Twitter. We're Twin Forks Music. I think our Facebook is even Twin Forks Music. So just to keep it simple, and so yeah, you can find us that way. We're pretty active online, and I think that's something I found, like, I think I got browbeaten out of it for a little while there. and I'm enjoying that aspect of as I have always loved the social aspect of being in a band, the actual social one, not like the metaphysical one or the online presence of one, which I do like also. But like I'm talking about, like generally I'm the person that sells the merch at the merch table.
Yeah.
And I'm not there because I really love selling merch, but I really love saying thank you to people that have come to see me play, maybe having a conversation up with them and getting to know them a little bit. I think that there's got to be common interest beyond this one band for us as people. If you like Dashboard and I'm in Dashboard, or you like Twin Forks and I'm in Twin Forks, we've got to have something else in common. Everything points us to having more in common than that, and so often we do.
Awesome.
So it's that's another part of it where I say I won the lottery. But I did feel like a little bit like that became work to have that presence online, and it doesn't feel like work anymore. It just feels like a fun, like, yeah, let me reach out and look at this stupid thing that happened to me today. Like, I got stung by bees. I'm going to put it on, look at my face. It looks ridiculous. I mean, there's no reason to be precious about these things, I think like when all that stuff started to happen so widely, and the paradigm shifted to from interaction with your fans to in person, to it being almost more important to have it in online. There was like, but you still have to be cool. Like, well, I'm not cool when they meet me, so what? I don't know how to do this. And so I've been waiting for I waited enough, and turns out people don't need you to be cool online.
Just be yourself.
Yeah, like you are. They're more excited when you're like yourself when they meet you in person, as opposed to like bigger than life, I think, or at least they seem appreciative of that. No, yeah. I don't wear a lot of leather jackets. I have one. I don't wear I want to be cooler. I want to be cooler than I am, but this is exactly as cool as I am. That's all I can do.
Well, that can be your next Instagram post.
Okay, fair enough. That's actually really funny. I'm actually going to post that in 10 minutes.
Nice. Thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate it. Thanks for taking so much of your time. I know this has been kind of disjointed, but
it was disjointed, but I will talk to you anytime for as long as you want to talk. I really enjoy your podcast. I listened to it after.
Oh my gosh.
I admit to listening to it once before, but listening to a ton of it since we've talked, and just helped me drive to Nashville 2 nights ago. As I just decided I have to go to Nashville today, and I was in South Florida, like Miami.
Oh my gosh!
So I was happy to have you with me, and it made me more nervous for today, and I think I did more poorly today than I did the other day.
No.
But let's talk again, and let's book like an hour, because I talk. I love to chat with guys that I think are intelligent, or women that I think are intelligent interviewers. Not that everyone isn't, but sometimes people have bad days too.
I'm so into it. I'll see you next month in DC. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, cool. Great. I can't wait. Let's try to talk again then.
Absolutely.
We can talk about anything you want. All right.
Well, that is the end of our show this week, guys. I'd like to thank everybody who checked this episode out. We had a lot of fun taping it, and Chris is just one of the nicest people you could ever hope to meet. So incredibly thoughtful and gracious with his time, and I'd like to thank him again for coming on the show and telling so many great stories. Like he mentioned, if you'd like to keep up with all that Twin Forks have going on, you can go to their website, twinforksmusic.com. You can find them on Twitter at twinforksmusic. Chris's Twitter handle is at Chris Carrabba, and the band is launching a North American tour beginning June 27th in Corpus Christi, Texas, that wraps up July 24th in Gainesville, Florida. It hits most of the U.S. and a few cities in Canada, so if you're close to any of those shows, I highly recommend you go check them out. They're just an incredible live band. It's a lot of fun. You'll have a blast. If you would like to stay up to date with all that we have going on here at the podcast, here are all the ways you can do so. Go to our website, voiceanddiversepodcast.com. We are also on Twitter at voiceversepod and on Facebook at facebook.com/voiceanddiversepodcast. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. All of those links are over at voiceanddiversepodcast.com under any episode's show page. So please feel free to subscribe and leave a nice review and tell your friends. That would be amazing. Go do that and then come back in 2 weeks for another episode of the Voice and Verse podcast when we uncover more of the stories behind your favorite songs. Thanks for listening, guys. We will see you soon.